DeepCool is a brand that most people associate with PC cooling, and in fact, all of my fans and CPU cooler in my PC are DeepCool products. Well, this year they've decided to expand their range, and this includes 2 new wireless gaming mice. I must admit my first reaction to hearing about DeepCool's new products was, why? There's already so many keyboards and mice out there. What can DeepCool do that's any different? But also because the MG510 costs $69.99 in the UK, and that puts it around the same price or even more expensive than veteran brands like Razer, Logitech and SteelSeries. Considering those brands have had years of experience making mice, it'll be interesting to see where the DeepCool MG510 fits in. Hi, my name's Jack and welcome to another Kit Guru review. Now I've got to say right at the beginning of this video, I've been using this mouse for about 2 weeks and quite honestly it's been a really good experience, and in this video I want to talk about why. But before we get into that, let's take a look at what we get inside the box. The DeepCool MG510 comes in pretty standard white packaging. It doesn't really feel like it has much of a brand to it yet, other than being like a typical white boxed PC item. There are a few spot gloss elements that look nice, but nothing particularly special about the packaging. At the back of the box, you do have all the information you need about the mouse, including the sensor type, DPI, tracking speed, and so on. Now opening the box up, you get another white box. You'll find the mouse, a 2-meter USB-C to USB-A flexible paracord cable, and this is actually good quality. It's flexible and lightweight, which should be perfect if you decide to use this mouse in wired mode. You also get a USB-A to USB-C dongle, and this can be used as a range extender for the 2.4 GHz dongle included. So looking at the overall design of this mouse, it is pretty simplistic. It has an ambidextrous design aimed more towards fingertip and claw grip users, but its shape does offer support for your thumb and little finger if you want to use palm grip. The mouse is on the small side, especially as it isn't advertised as a small mouse. It comes in at 12.4 centimeters long, 6.5 centimeters wide, and 3.9 centimeters tall. And comparing it to a larger mouse like the NZXT Lift or the Razer DeathAdder V2, you can see a noticeable difference in length. And there are side buttons on the left of the mouse, so it is aimed more towards right-handed players. Now I've been using this with fingertip grip and claw grip for gaming, and it's been really comfortable. There's also a lovely texture on the sides of the mouse that honestly feel great and doesn't give me that sweaty feeling a lot of ridged grips do. There's a small battery indicator. This turns red when the battery is low and red when charging, and then it turns green when fully charged. Then for RGB, we have the DeepCool logo and a small strip along the bottom. I must admit the minimal amount of RGB looks great to me, but if you're someone who prefers more RGB light options, then you might be disappointed. I think it looks pretty great though. I do have one complaint about the USB cable, and that's that it has this kind of lock mechanism, so you can't just pull it out of the mouse, but sometimes this is actually quite tricky to even get into the mouse in the first place, as it is quite a tight fit. So looking at the underside of the mouse, we have this teal blue color scheme, which I'm not a huge fan of, but that's just personal preference. You might like it. Luckily, it's underneath, so other than being visible around the edge of the mouse, you really won't see it in day-to-day use. There's 2 PTFE glider pads for smooth gliding, and on both a mouse mat and a wooden desk, this feels incredibly smooth. Now the mouse has a plastic construction, but feels well made, and only has some slight flex if you apply some intense pressure, which you'll really likely never do, I hope. There's also no rattling sounds, no creaking, so overall I am incredibly impressed by the build quality of this mouse from DeepCool. Now weighing the MG510 on my scales, it shows an 86 gram weight without the cable, yet this is advertised as 83 grams on the website. Is this going to be a noticeable difference? Probably not, but it's definitely not the lightest mouse, especially when you compare it to the glorious D-, but it's been fine for FPS games during my tests. The mouse features 6 programmable buttons in total. The 2 primary buttons feature Omron D2FC switches rated for 20 million clicks, and they feel great, nice and clicky. There's virtually 0 pre and post travel on this mouse. There's a tiny bit, but this really surprised me. I'm impressed by this. The clicks on the mouse feel fast and responsive, and when gaming it has been a joy to use. And then we have the scroll wheel, and this is an interesting design. There are 5 tiny little rubber dots on each row, giving a ton of grip. And there's some nice resistance as well, more than enough to stop you accidentally scrolling too fast. There is a slight bit of wobble side to side if you kind of force the scroll wheel to do it, but in general, when you're using it in day-to-day use, you're not going to notice any wobble at all. The scroll wheel click uses Kale switches, and this feels nice and clicky and not spongy like some middle mouse clicks can be. Now the button under the scroll wheel is to change lighting modes. When pressed, you'll cycle through 9 modes, including off. These 9 modes are Prism Stream, Monocolor, Breathing, Motion Streak, Neon, Colorful, Flicker, Flashing Star, and Wave. Now each of these are further customizable in the software, and I'll come to that later. Now the 2 side buttons mix a matte and gloss finish, and although quite small, they feel great. They are also Cal switches similar to the middle mouse button. There's very little wobble to them, and they have a fairly loud click that I like. And here's a quick sound test of all the different buttons. Turning the mouse over, we have a few more buttons and a toggle. The first is for DPI. This will cycle through 7 DPI levels by default, starting with 500 DPI and going all the way up to 19,000 DPI. Each of these steps are indicated with an LED light, although if you don't have the software, there's no real way to know which DPI you're on, as this isn't included in the manual or anywhere online. Now the next button is to adjust the polling rate, and this will cycle between 250, 500 and 1000 Hz polling rate. Polling rate will affect the battery in this mouse, so the higher the polling rate, the quicker the battery will drain. So I suppose what you could do is when you're not gaming, go to a lower polling rate. Finally, we have the main power toggle switch, and here you can go from power off to on and to LED on. On mode just turns on the functionality of the mouse, but there's no LEDs, and then LED mode, well, it's pretty self-explanatory. This is a really nice feature though, so you can actually use this mouse without the LEDs on to save battery life. When it comes to battery life, the mouse does offer up to 36 hours of constant use, which is impressive. Now this is tricky to test because the mouse has an auto off feature every 60 seconds, so you can't just leave it for 36 hours to test this. The mouse is reactivated again when you click a button or use the scroll wheel, and unfortunately you can't turn off this mode at all, so there's no way to turn off the auto power off. I don't really have a problem with this though, because essentially it's giving you as much battery life as possible. Now I've been using this mouse with LEDs on for about a week and I've not had to charge it at all because of that auto power off function, which I think is really good. If you're using this mouse with LEDs off, you'd probably get like 2 to 3 weeks out of this mouse. The sensor in the MG510 is the PixArt 3370, which was released in 2020. This offers a maximum of 19,000 DPI, a little overkill for today's resolutions, 400 IPS tracking speed, 50 Gs of max acceleration, 1mm of liftoff distance, and an error rate of 0.5%. We can actually test the liftoff distance by using these Blu-ray discs, which are around 1mm in thickness. So if I move the mouse on the mouse mat, you can see that it tracks absolutely perfectly. But if I put these discs underneath the mouse, they should stop it from tracking, and as you can see, the mouse no longer tracks. So the advertised 1mm distance of this is correct. And honestly, this mouse has felt pretty much flawless for every single use case, working, gaming, anything. I've been using this mouse on some competitive games like Rainbow Six Siege and some PUBG as well, and although the MG510 is from a brand that really isn't associated with gaming mice, this performs just as well as those veteran brands I mentioned at the beginning of the video, which in a way is pretty amazing that DeepCool has just come along and made this mouse as good as it is. It's well made, the buttons feel great, there's virtually no pre and post travel, and the sensor is more than enough to offer great gaming performance. DeepCool includes a fairly basic but functional software for the mouse, so let's take a look at that. So you can create new profiles as well as rename, import and export existing profiles. There's a very clear battery indicator, and from the first tab you can customize buttons as well as the polling rate and the lighting. Now the button customizations allow you to assign macros, add rapid fire, key combos and much more. Polling modes can be switched between 125, 250, 500 and 1000 Hz. And finally on this tab you can customize the lighting, and you can go through the 9 different modes I mentioned before and add as much customization as you like. Now one downside of the software is that there's only a handful of settings that let you adjust the overall LED brightness. For example, if you go to monocolor, you get a brightness slider, but if you change to flicker, there is no option for this. So if you want to save battery life by using a reduced brightness, unfortunately you can't in a number of different modes. And the next tab is to adjust DPI levels as well as the LED indicators on the underside of the mouse. From here you can have up to 7 DPI levels and customize the LED to pretty much any color you want. Next we have mouse parameters, and here you can adjust mouse sensitivity, scrolling speed, double click speed, and I just left these on default. Finally we have macro recording options, and here you can create new macros and modify existing macros. For those of you who use macros, you'll enjoy having this feature. After using this mouse for about 2 weeks, I can confidently say that the DeepCool MG510 offers fantastic performance from a brand that most people would rarely associate with mice. When it comes to competitive games like Rainbow Six Siege, PUBG, or even more casual games, the mouse has been incredibly responsive and a joy to use. I think this is a surprisingly good mouse for the price, and as I said, especially as it comes from a brand that people don't really associate with mice at all. I feel pretty confident recommending the MG510 if you're looking for a wireless gaming mouse. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, it really helps out the Kit Guru channel. If you want to see more from us, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon, and you'll be notified when we upload another video. If you want to pick up some cool merch, like the t-shirt I've been wearing in this video, the links are in the description. You can also support us on Patreon as well to unlock some exclusive content. Be sure to follow us on social media for the latest updates. My name's Jack, you've been watching Kit Guru, and I'll see you in the next one.